Okay, Tribe, so we're here today with Dr. Brandt Smith and with Hanjiro, and we'll be interviewing a man that has been crucial to my personal development, one of my mentors, a man that influenced me in more ways than I can talk about. Brandt, I want to thank you for being on. It's a pleasure to have you. And I was hoping you can just give us a brief introduction to yourself for those of the listeners that may not be familiar with you, who have not met you before. And tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and what you do.
I'm Brandt Smith. I'm a professor of psychology at Columbus State University in Georgia. I do research on post-traumatic stress disorder and on intergroup conflict, two separate lines of research. I've got a background in Kali and Pencak Silat, Junfan Jeet Kune Do, the pre-73 and the Jeet Kune Do concepts world, a little bit of both. Wrestling, boxing, very organic, approach to martial arts. But anybody can throw a punch or a kick, and so the style's not really that important. It gets down to how a person lives, and I think this kind of bridges into what you were asking me when we talked yesterday about what is warriorship, and I was thinking about it last night, and you actually got me thinking again. And the idea of a modern professional military, it's pretty damn new to humans. I mean, we really didn't have one until the rise of the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. A soldier, that's not what he did for a living. He was a cobbler or a farmer or a fisherman until a war broke out and he was called up and he had to dust off a breastplate and go find his spear and go to work. But when the war was over, he got his fishing pole or his farm implement, and he went back to farming and fishing and cobbling and whatever he did. But that's we just didn't have a professional military. So being a professional soldier is not the same as being a warrior. They can be the same thing, and we're lucky enough that they often are. The men and women that serve in the military are often also warriors, which is good. It would be really bad for us if it was otherwise. It's just that idea for the warrior has to make a decision, and it's a moral decision, that the health and safety of their community is more important than that individual's life. That they're willing to lay it down. Most people do that for themselves. They can fight in self-defense to protect themselves or to protect their family. Some might be able to rise to the level of looking after your neighborhood, but to defend a nation, that takes a little bit higher abstraction of the idea of survival. A warrior makes that decision, and the warrior stands for everything that is decent and right in his own society, or I should say his or her own society, because we've got women in combat roles now, and there's certainly been women warriors throughout human history.
Hanjiro.
Yeah.
And do you have any questions for Brandt about how the warrior may be defined? Because I'm interested in knowing, Brandt, what is the working definition for a warrior? Because like you said, anybody can punch and kick, anybody can be a soldier, but it doesn't necessarily make you a warrior. So what's a working definition that we can? I know it's a very big concept, and it's sometimes very abstract. But what's something concrete that we can kind of set down as a guideline?
Well, I know in our modern PC world, I'm supposed to talk about somebody who works really hard at software or something like that and call them a warrior. Sorry, guys, that's bullshit. The warrior measures the cost and decides that there is no cost, that it is an honor to lay down one's life, one's own well-being in service of that higher calling, one's own society, one's own nation, standing up for right. It's really rooted in the notion of survival. Because, a parent fights for their children because they want their children to survive, they want their family to survive. A warrior will fight for his or her society because they want that society to flourish. And
Doctor,
with that kind of definition, it makes it really, really difficult to hate an enemy who's doing the same thing, just for the other side.
Doctor, it's very interesting and very intriguing view on this. And I have a question as to your personal view. Was this informed by, how do you say, academic study, or is this informed more by personal practice within your martial arts, or where does most of your philosophy come from?
Well, the short answer is yes. That's the short answer. And the truth of the matter is I wish I could make the clean, lines that I got this from here and I got this from here. And the fact of the matter is I can't tell you that. I don't know. My life as a martial artist is not separate from my life as an academic, my life as a husband, as a son, as a friend. It's like it's one thing for me. It's like when you talk about business ethics, no such thing as business ethics. If it's not ethical at home, it's not ethical at work. And so I have trouble being able to just neatly categorize it for myself. I know that makes for easy writing and stuff like that, but to be able to answer your question, it's a tough one, bro. I don't know if I could say I got it from martial arts in particular, or my own studies, or my own meditations, or just things that I picked up along the way. It's like learned it at my grandmother's knee or something. I don't know. What I do know is that human life is valuable. It is so valuable, I can't put a cost on it. And then the problem comes up where two people or two groups or two nations are in conflict, and the unfortunate necessity of killing comes up. Then we have a very severe problem. To not kill will get somebody else killed. But in order to stop that from happening, you have to kill somebody else. So we end up with these crises of value. And that's where the philosophic question comes in. I really love sci-fi movies because they make it easy. Independence Day, it's easy. Earth, right? We know whose side we're on. Nobody wants the aliens to win. But when it gets down between human beings, we have to make the decision. And I don't really like seeing the ham-fisted, blunt, my country right or wrong. Let's just go turn that whole place into a glass parking lot. I mean, that's just stupid. We're talking about human lives, and most of them aren't really involved in the conflict. They just get caught up in it.
It's an interesting point, Doctor. The other being, at one point, do you see detachment from a personal, societal, whatever it is, detachment in conflict being a way to either justify or allow violence towards, like you said, using the sci-fi? It's easy to detach ourselves, us versus them, between an alien or something that is not human, whereas opposed to tribal, personal, racial, ethnic, these differences, but we're still human. But like many people have said, that the first thing that happens to allow us to fight each other is detachment or explanation of us versus them. Where do you see that in the timeline of conflict, say, personal conflict, individuals?
Well, I wouldn't say so much detachment, because we don't really unlearn the fact that we're not supposed to kill. We're all taught that. We're all taught to share and try to be nice. I mean, every culture in the world teaches that, right? That's no big deal. I'd say it's dehumanization. I'm going to go ahead and use some phrases that some of my colleagues in academia wouldn't like to hear me use. But I'm going to use them because it's brutal and it's to the point, and I think it illustrates what I'm trying to say. It becomes easy for somebody to hang somebody else when he's not a human, he's a nigger. It becomes easy to kill a bunch of people in the jungle when they're not people, they're gooks, or zipperheads, or slopes. it becomes easy to dehumanize a group when they're not humans, but they're beaners or wetbacks. And we're able to separate ourselves. We're able to look at them as other. And today, they're not humans. They're sand niggers or hajis or camel fuckers. And we use those, and of course you won't see those on the news, they're censors. But you hear people in public using them constantly. And whatever my thoughts on the conflict against the Islamic State and other organizations are immaterial. I'm really interested in how we convince ourselves it's okay to kill a bunch of people. And we have to make it okay for ourselves in order to be able to do it. Otherwise, well, then you have to just own up that you're killing people. And that's one of the things that a warrior is able to do. He can kill people, and he will bear those psychological and, dare I say, spiritual scars for his society. A Pascal Lamb, if you will. That he carries the sins of that society when other people are able to, kill the Hajis. The warrior knows that he's killing another human being. And it's unfortunate that we're able to convince ourselves of this. But we have a remarkable capacity for being able to destroy each other. And as a martial artist, it's funny that we're talking about this as a martial artist. We study combat, right? My concern about martial arts has always been, why are we teaching? It's like, you guys are skilled martial artists, no doubt. You guys can probably do all kinds of damage to a human form. And that's not hard to teach. Really not hard to teach. I think the most pressing issue that we as modern day martial artists should be doing, I think we should be spending a lot of time out and teaching fight.
Right. There's the idea of limiting the amount of damage or conflict or killing. Do you feel that instilled within a professional idea of the professional warrior, like you said? Or is that something that's multiple points, like within a cultural or a philosophical or religious, and not just from the idea of the professional soldier or martial artist kind of person that would be able to take life or do these things, be it out of professionalism or, like I said, those other things? Where do you think that falls primarily?
I saw an interview with a United States Marine, senior NCO. I can't remember what rank he was, and I don't remember the guy's name. But he was interviewed. It was back in Gulf War Part 1. And he was asked about, hating the Iraqis. And he's like, no, we don't hate them. There's no anger here. He's like, my Marines are professionals. They're doing a job. It's not about anger. It's not about hate. And we go down a dark path when we make fighting or combat about anger and hate. We make it very dangerous, because then it has a tendency to go down avenues that we don't want to. A place where we have to sacrifice more of our humanity. And, if we can get to it, it's like, hey, this is the way of the world, whether or not I like it as a material. Sometimes you have to fight. Try to do it for the right reasons. But if we go down that easy path of saying, no, that's just some beaner or that's just some Haji, then we start going down a path that justifies the Holocaust.
Now, Dr. Smith, one of the things that you mentioned here that I think is an important idea to pull away for the audience to really internalize is that concept of accountability. That's what I'm hearing in what you're saying. That the difference between the warrior and maybe the fighter is that the warrior never makes any excuses for what they're doing, and they own what they're doing. They understand.
They take personal responsibility for the health and safety of the body politic and their actions.
And this accountability is something that I believe applies to many different aspects of life. I mean, all of life. I mean, if you're living, so if I'd like to take a moment and see what your thoughts are as far as the everyday person that's not getting up and going to a battlefield, how does this accountability play into their life, into their personal warriorship path?
Well, let me put on my old cranky guy hat for a second. And maybe this is because I'm getting a little bit up there in years. You know, I'm not too old yet. I'm still pretty spry, and will be for another 30 or 40 years. But, you know, if you don't have an income, it's not because the man won't let you work. If you don't have a Bentley, it's not because some rich guys didn't have it. You know, if you don't have food on your table, it's not because somebody is prohibiting. But we have to get over the notion that the world is ran by unicorn party. It's a rough place. That's why there are warriors. And sometimes you really got to get out there and struggle. Now, that issue of accountability is, if nothing else, in your life, you own your own life. It is yours. And though I would love to help the whole world, and most people would, you know, it's like most people, you've been around, all of you guys have traveled, most people are decent. You know, a warrior's going to take responsibility for his or her own life and say, the situation I am in is my responsibility, and no matter how difficult it may be, you can work your way out of it. Dave, you don't know this about me. I used to be homeless. It was a very, very tough, soul-crushing time. And all because of my own mistakes, stupidity, what have you. But I was able to work my way out of it. It was tough. It took a long time. It was hard. But I got out of it. Luckily, you know, I had a keen mind. You know, I wasn't ill, you know, either physically or mentally. So I was able to do so. You know, on that note, a warrior also has to remember that if you are strong, you have some responsibility to your society to protect those that are weaker than yourselves. And that's why we protect children. You know, that's why we try to protect people that are developmentally disabled or they're handicapped for some reason by, you know, either by birth or, you know, injury. That's why we look after the elderly. You know, so we should. And if you're strong, I can't say you have a responsibility. I would say that you have a moral obligation, though. You know, that if you are strong, you should do something. You should always speak right. Basically, you should always do what's right, even if it's difficult. Most people can do the right thing when it's easy or socially acceptable. But it becomes difficult when the right thing is not popular.
So, Doctor, again, I'll ask just because I'm always curious from your particular standpoint where this is kind of informed, and I'll give a little thing. Every time I go to Japan, it's just me. I like to make sure that I can still do, you know, let my mouth write sex and my ass can still cash.
Yeah.
And it's easy in Japan because the Yakuza are all over the place. They're like punks everywhere, you know, some serious, some not so serious. Every time I stick up for an older person, like getting shaken down, nobody does anything. You know, they just leave it alone. It's not a big deal. Of the Yakuza, whatever, they let it, you know, they let me throw these guys around, whatever. But if it's a younger person or a person about my age that should be able to handle themselves, and if I get involved, I most assuredly will have somebody with a knife or something else coming up on me. Where most, like in society, they understand, similarly, you defend the young, you defend the old. You don't allow these things to happen. And if they do, for other people to step in is expected. Whereas the younger people or people that should be able to handle themselves, if you don't get up and take care of yourself, you're doubly damned. Do you feel that, and where does that come for you? Does that come from a religious or like in Japan, it's a social understanding? It's different here, obviously, but where does that feeling, that drive, that impetus come for you?
This is going to sound like I'm going off topic. I'm not. in my research lab back in El Paso, I was having, undergraduates coming to me wanting to be research assistants, and they couldn't answer basic stats questions, and I was getting angry. And then I stepped back and I'm like, wait a minute, I teach that damn class. If they can't answer the question, I'm the one doing something wrong. Well, if somebody our age can't handle themselves, what the hell did we do wrong? And I do believe that silence is consent. If you can watch it happen and do nothing, you're consenting. Even if you don't like it, you're consenting.
Right.
Yeah, and when I say you are, I'm using that in the editorial sense. I'm not saying you personally. I'm saying all of us.
No, fully understandable. I think we've all, as human beings, had some time that we've let something go and later on gone back to think that we should have done something about it, small or big. But yeah.
If you feel bad walking away from it, you probably did something wrong.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's like, I see where you're coming, and they are hard choices. And you always have to approach it with reason. And like, can I make the good ones? Or you're just going to get yourself killed too. I've never been to Japan. So I've always wanted to visit, never had the opportunity. I have been to the Middle East, and I've met some wonderful, just really decent people over there. They're great. Just decent. Kind of like if you went to, I don't know, Lincoln, Nebraska, you'd probably meet a lot of really cool, decent people too. Same all over. A friend of mine recently got really, really upset with me when I referred to the Islamic State as savage. And she was like, well, you can't call them savages. And I'm like, well, this is a group that believes it's okay to mutilate the genitals of a 12-year-old girl and sell girls off into slavery and burn pilots alive. I'm like, that's freaking savage. And it cannot be acceptable. In a decent world, in the kind of world that everybody really wants to live in, that type of behavior is just not acceptable. We don't accept murderers and pedophiles. No, even inmates don't accept pedophiles. You have to draw the line somewhere. Everything is not permissible.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but that great parallel, that great line of division of what is acceptable and not. I've been to Egypt and Sinai and a couple places in the Middle East, and even the thing between Japan and there and everywhere else that I've been, even in America, is there's always some standard of what's acceptable and not. It may vary a little bit, but the basic human standards are there. But it seems to be informed by different things, be it society or religion, which in sometimes, like in the Middle East, religion is pervasive in society so much more than here. So where do you see that here?
Oh, in the United States, even though we like to be very cool and unchurched, come on, most people in the world subscribe to some type of religion, even if they want to say the cool yoga pants things like, well, the universe is telling me. All right, just say God. You can dress it up however you want. People are looking to some type of higher authority or higher power. What does this mean to you as a martial artist? Well, you should have something to be able to anchor your decision-making to. Whether or not I have pizza or cheeseburgers tonight, I might consider it a really important decision for a few seconds, but then I'm going to go on. That's not a big deal. Big decisions, you want some type of principle, some foundation, some anchor where you make your decision making. And it gets down to, why would you spend? I know Vargas, and I assume that you too, have also spent a good chunk of your life studying and practicing martial arts. Guys, that's mental. That's crazy, unless you got a reason.
Right.
I mean, really, you get that and you think about why. I know why I got involved. I was going to be Bruce Lee when I grew up. And I was going to have special Dimmock skills, and I was going to have all this power. But I was a stupid kid. And you have to really, really think about why. And then there's the integration of you as a martial arts being with husband, father, friend, colleague, whatever, member of the poker club, and it becomes one unified being. And you don't have divisions in your psyche. And I think that's what I mentioned him. I think that's even what Bruce Lee was getting at. There is no difference in these one persona, and we have to be able to, at least to ourselves, really specify why we train, why we do what we do, and why we feel about things the way that we do. And I can't give you an answer that you can live with. Right. If you and I came up with the same answer, you have to have your own answer. If you do it for power and have the magic Dimmock powers to where I can kill people at a distance, I can't, by the way. No one's taught me that yet. And my force choke powers aren't working either. But you got to know why you're doing it. At this level of training that you, a lot of your listeners, a lot of other people, are working at it. A lot of them are fantastic martial artists, outstanding. I've seen so much talent up there. And you sitting down and talk with them over a beer or dinner or something, and they're talking about why I train. Oh, they want to be better. And I'm like, okay, cool, but why? What's the purpose? What's driving that passion? And I think that might be the most important question that a person as a warrior needs to answer. Why? Why are we doing this? There are so many, some of you are also martial arts instructors. So, that's a really quick way to go broke. What do you do if you win the lottery? Well, keep teaching martial arts till the money runs out.
Right.
Yeah. And, it's a set of skills that our society doesn't really value.
So that being said, do you see that it is a social or some kind of like a debt that you need to repay to society for knowing these things in order to ensure security within society or teaching the next generation or that kind of thing?
I think those who know should teach. And Dave, this is for you. I'm probably in the next couple of years going to be teaching publicly again in at least a semi-public fashion.
Long awaited.
Even though I said I was never going to do it again, obviously I was lying. I'm probably going to do it again. I've changed my mind. I might. Semi-public. I don't like martial arts politics.
Yeah.
Puts me in a cranky mood. But, yeah, I think that if you know something and somebody else wants to learn it, and you're able to work out some equitable deal, either in pizza or money or whatever, or even better, a good student-instructor relationship where you get to pass on what you know, I think you should. And so we have to preserve these things. Some of I look at martial arts, I think about personal combatives, then I think about self-defense, and then I just think about the cultural treasure. What I mean by cultural treasure or a museum art, these beautiful forms, whatever you call them, juris, katas, or whatever, they should be preserved just for the cultural treasure that self-defense has nothing to do with fighting whatsoever. It has just being smart and being aware of your surroundings. Don't let it happen to you. Be as sharp as you can. Personal combatives happens when your self-defense fails.
Do you see the philosophy or the effectiveness being the primary need within a martial art or a self-defense? Self-defense, I get in the name itself, it means to defend yourself, but spiritually or mentally or, as you or studying maybe a field of expertise can give you better answer to this than most of us understand with PTSD, to be able to even kind of straighten yourself, defend your mind from violent happenings and that kind of thing.
I know that when my reason why crystallized in my head, my skills just improved dramatically. As soon as I knew why I was doing it, and I could anchor it to key principles, my skills improved. So answering these philosophic questions actually makes you a better martial artist.
Brandt, I want to take you back a little bit. I am glad that we covered the warrior trait of accountability. And one thing I wanted to talk about, because it's something that I find important in my view of warriorship, and I use an analogy from a movie. I don't know if either of you have seen the movie Rounders with Ed Norton and Matt Damon.
I may have.
Okay, so the movie's about a card player, and Matt Damon's character is kind of chasing the pipe dream, and he's willing to blow money. He's blown a bunch of money trying to get to like the World Series of Poker, and he's wiped out. He's got bad guys looking for him. He goes to a friend who he wants to hit up for money. And the friend, kind of gets mad at him and tells him, look, I taught you how to play poker. I tried to teach you that you need to, watch your money. You got to, make sure you don't bet too much. You don't take too many risks. And Matt Damon's character gets upset with him and yells at him and says, you know what, you got no balls. Who are you to tell me anything? You've got no balls. You won't, you see all the angles, but you won't, you won't make a play for anything. And his buddy retorts and says, you know what? I pay child support. I pay alimony. I got to pay rent. I got to get all this stuff done, put food on the table. I can't afford to chase pipe dreams. That takes balls. And that always stuck with me. And I took it away, and mulled it over for a very long time. And it was funny. The idea came to me from a film. I mean, I find in my life that happens often. I get bits of insight from the weirdest places. But
find wisdom wherever you can get it, man.
Yeah. And, we talk a lot about warriors. Everybody talks about warriors. And people have these ideas of these, grand plays, the grandstanding, and that's what the warrior is. And I really came to internalize that it's more about those small struggles, kind of those mundane struggles, and getting through them. And kind of like the character in the movie that said, no, you know what, I have balls, but it's because I don't make that big risk and don't take that big, that big run at the play. I'm making sure that food's on the table. I'm making sure that I'm getting through day by day and that everything is taken care of. What are your thoughts on something like that?
Brother, I'd say that guy's actually taking the bigger risk.
So how do you
feel? Really, he's taking on responsibility for the health and welfare of other people, and he's doing his job and putting a roof over their head, food on the table, defending that family. That's a much bigger risk to go out on some adrenaline-driven drive playing poker all night. Hell, that's easy. I could do that. I'm not a good poker player either, so I wouldn't last long. But it's like it's much harder to be an adult and live day to day and deal with all the bullshit that people have to put up with on a day to day basis, and to do it well. And you think about what real wealth is. Well, sounds like the guy that's doing his job is the one that's got the real wealth. The other guy having a good time, but he's out of cash and the mob's looking for him. So, who wins?
Yeah. And I really think that's part of the way I view warriorship is not being, it's being there for the endurance, for all the small battles.
Talked about at the beginning of this, a warrior is not necessarily a professional soldier, and those are really new in human society. They were fishermen, cobblers, family men. They had kids, grandkids, wives, talking trash down at the tavern, playing pool, and then it's time to fight. and they dust it off the breastplate, stretched out, work the arthritis out of their hand, get their spear, and go to work. And then when the war's over, they go home, and they get their fishing pole, or they get their mason tools, and they go back to being carpenters and family men. You know, it's a warrior is, you know, our arts are not about ending life. They're about preserving life. And, you know, we, especially, you know, those of us that are in blade arts, like to shoot, you know, it's like, yeah, we cannot ever lie to ourselves. What we study, what we train is lethal. It can end another human being's life. But if we do it to end life, well, then we're no better than some dirty thug out on the street. You know, if we do it to preserve life, we might be able to build something better. We know the cost of conflict, so we might be a little bit more willing to avoid it. You know, one of my instructors said that go ahead and be nice. You're tough enough to afford it.
Now, Dr. Smith, I want to ask you, you know, we talked a lot about the warrior protecting what's valuable in society and doing the right thing for society. And inevitably, that concept of the right thing comes into play. The world's a big subjective place.
It is.
And I've had conversations with people that are, you know, amongst my best friends, people I would trust my life with. And they come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives. And what's right doesn't always line up. For myself...
No, not at all.
Yeah, and for myself, I've found a measuring stick in the spiritual aspect, in spirituality, as far as being a Christian. And that's how I've been able to, you know, set the meter as where I have to be and what I have to do. How do you see spirituality playing into warriorship? And when I say spirituality, I don't mean, you know, like you said, the yoga pants, but you know, a formal, you know, religious training, a formal affiliation with a school of thought and a way of worship. I know that you've had some experience, you know, in different faiths even, and tell me about how that's affected your view of warriorship.
Okay, first, I have no beliefs, none whatsoever. They get in the way, or I try not to have. They get in the way of learning. If there is a one true God and ineffable deity, it's far too big for my puny human mind to ever understand with the contents of some book written by some dude. All right? Everyone wants to say their book is the unerring, you know, Word of God. Yeah, well, I think there'd only be one of them then, but I guess all the other religions are wrong. You know, that's why it's like I try to dispense with belief, and I try to experience the world directly. Now, spiritual training is sufficient but not necessary. It is sufficient in that it can give those principled anchors. Now, I don't know. I hope that there's something after, you know, this material life of mine ends. I hope, you know, I can have faith in that. What I do know, and I'm able to empirically show that there is a continuation of civilization, of human life. You know, maybe not my own, but, you know, my nieces, our children. And we need to try to do that because we have an evolutionary imperative to do so. Let's go ahead and say that we're just designed by biology to do that. Who cares, right? We have that. I do know that there's a continuation of humanity. And I know that for certain. That's why I say spiritual training is sufficient, but not necessary. Now, I'm not denograting spiritual training. For a lot of people, it becomes necessary, but it provides those principled anchors, you know, for a martial artist, a real martial artist, to use as a foundation for those decision making. Was that even English?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. Hanji, what are your thoughts on this? Because you've had some exposure to different faiths, and I know in your experience in Japan, there are some, I don't know if you realize, the connections or overlays between religion and the warriorship.
Yeah, it's my background. My family's from different places and moved around a lot, but I got to see violence based upon religious factions early in life, and was very predisposed not to subscribe to those things. But in training specifically in a couple of Japanese martial arts, they're based in those societies which are heavily influenced by philosophy and religion, like Shinto and Tendai Buddhist and those kind of things. So there was my second sword teacher who was the first guy to split my collarbone from my clavicle with a wooden sword early on, said that our religious drive and our theological direction is as dangerous as a sharpened pike. And he said, if there are 1,000 sharpened pikes pointed in one direction and you're going the opposite direction, even if you feel that you're absolutely correct, it's still dangerous enough to oppose 1,000 sharpened pikes. So it's having a funny way of saying, no matter what, sometimes you just got to keep your mouth shut, even if you know you're right, and be careful. So,
nice. Yeah, my dad would have said, "Is that the hill you want to die on?"
Yeah, very similar, very similar. So, my our ideas basically are the same, of acceptance and sometimes understanding the greater good for what something may be temporary, like our own, tiny little lives here on this speck of dirt of a planet. But even more so, just because I have had people of a different faith come up and put a gun to my head and say, you're the wrong faith, you're going to die now. And I completely, in order to save my own skin, said, no, you get the wrong guy. I pray, and I knew a couple of proper prayers, and I said them, and the guy said, "Oh, how did I get this wrong? You're just a faker." And I said, "You're willing to go to hell for possibly killing a person who was of the faith, but you thought was a faker, or are you going to give me a chance?" And they give me a few seconds, and then then the situation changed. So I think it's
we're bridging away from what Vargas was talking about, spiritual training, and we're getting to religion. Now that's a different animal right there, because a religion is a brutal social club. It has nothing to do with faith or spirituality whatsoever. It's a brutal social club that will kill you for not being a member of the right club.
Right.
That's the thing. And it is the equivalent of killing somebody because they're black.
Now, Brandt, I'm glad that you mentioned this, because it segues perfectly into my next set of questions for you, and specifically dealing with your research and topic that's on everybody's mind now, especially here in the United States. With everything going on, with all the tensions and the different organizations that are coming under Islam, and what people will want to call radical Islam, other people will argue, no, it's not radical, it's all Islam. You have some firsthand experience with Islam, and your research has revealed a lot to you. What are your thoughts on what's going on? With the ever-growing, threats, everybody is afraid. People are starting to react panicky. It scares me. And I'll tell you this, what scares me more than, and people may think I'm crazy for saying this, but what scares me more than the Islamic State and their violent actions is seeing the reactions of my neighbors, my coworkers, the people I see on a day-to-day basis, people that are otherwise intelligent, relatively well-informed people, good people, but they become panicky. And, again, going back to film, I remember a great quote from the Tommy Lee Jones and Will Smith movie, the Men in Black movie, when Will Smith discovers that aliens exist, and Tommy Lee Jones brings him into the know. And Will Smith says, why don't we just tell everybody? Why don't, people are smart. And Tommy Lee Jones says, well, the person is smart. People are stupid and panicky. And that's how I feel. And I legitimately am afraid because I see this change in the character of my neighbors. Give me your thoughts on it. What's happening?
Okay, I'd like to predicate first with saying that if it was all Muslims, you two wouldn't be alive right now. There's a lot of freaking Muslims. All right? So let's just go ahead and say that outright. There's a lot of freaking Muslims. And if they were all terrorists, you'd all be dead. And then we can go on and look at some of the big terrorist actions and look at the perpetrators of it. None of them were hardcore devout Muslims. They were radicalized, and most of them out there beer drinking, going to strip clubs, weren't really into religion at all, and then they got radicalized. And what this is really, if you strip away religion, let's just call it Group A, Group B, they began to identify with their group so much, and they were convinced that their group was under attack. So they're lashing out. Like this whack job that decided to drive a truck through a crowd at the Bastille Day celebration in Nice, France. 84 people were killed. I guess now we also have to start talking about limiting access to trucks.
They've been doing that for a while. Every time I get a truck for work, I have to practically give a urine sample and blood test.
Yeah, but you don't need an assault truck. And so this is intergroup conflict. It has nothing to do with the damn religion, nothing at all. The religion becomes an identity. That religious club becomes an identity. Because, when it happens with people in the United States, like these whack jobs back in the 80s and early 90s, the army of God that was killing the so-called abortion doctors, everybody was willing to say, well, they're not real Christians. Real Christians don't do that. Well, I'm glad that there's some metric someplace that says, well, this guy's a real Christian, this one's not. And then, the Quran says, you ever read the Bible? Some pretty psychotic stuff in there. It's like, yeah, all these old books, were written by some desert tribes that had a really high opinion of themselves. No, you're not a chosen people. You're not magical. You're just people. And so when we look at this conflict that's happening with the Islamic State, most of their victims are Muslims, by the way. They're massacring them. These are psychotic, backwards savages that no thinking, decent, moral person should ever support. Ever. Period. And any warrior should stand against them. Because they are representing, and I don't use this word often in my life, they are pure evil. When they think it is okay to celebrate some guy driving a truck through a crowd of innocent people and killing 84 of them, knifing some little girl on a train in Germany because she was scantily clad. Come on, guys. You can't claim religion on that, on either end. That's evil. And, we could play the moral relativism thing, saying, well, that's just my subjective ideas on right or wrong. Okay. But, then remember that you got to stand against me. And it's almost, it almost sounds like I'm going for that old trial by combat, and the winner is obviously favored by God, right?
Yeah.
But you have to take a stand. There has to be a line. If human life is important, then that ideology is evil. Notice how I say the ideology, not the religion. The ideology that is put out by groups like Boko Haram or the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda. That's a brutal, brutal ideology. And in fact, I would go so far as to say that they're anti-Islam.
Now, Brandt, what do you...
Muslim.
What do you feel about the reaction that's happening here in the United States?
This is my fear, and this is being recorded. Right? New Year's Eve, there was this basically rape party throughout Germany, a couple other European states. Angela Merkel and some of the mayors of the German cities decided to try to cover it up, keep it quiet. What that just told all the German people is the government was siding with people that was groping and raping their daughters. You're going to get a reaction out of that. You're going to get a reaction out of that. And I've read a history book before, and I've seen that Germany, all of Europe, tries to be open and welcoming and accommodating to immigrants. And when they think that they are being treated bad, right, wrong, or indifferent, that, well, let's just say that you don't have to look too far back in history till you find a point where a religious minority was marginalized and then attacked and dealt with in Europe. Yeah. It could go that bad. The unfortunate thing is there would be thousands or millions of people that could be caught up in this that had absolutely nothing to do with it and are pretty decent people. The reaction is dangerous. People are responding out of fear, and that fear breeds xenophobia. It breeds bigotry. It wasn't too long ago that the Western world was mystified by the Middle East. 1,000 Nights in a Night. The Arabian Nights, Tales of the Arabian Nights. It used to be a bestseller. We used to love that. And now anything that is remotely even reminding people of the Middle East or Islam, these people get attacked. I mean, back in my wife's hometown of Grand Rapids, a Sikh who ran a liquor store was attacked and stabbed because they thought he was a Muslim. He's a Sikh. They're not even smart enough to be good bigots. This reaction turns very, very dangerous. It turns very dangerous because they weren't even attacking the right target for their bigotry. They went after a Sikh, or they go after a Hindu.
Right.
They're like, wow, he looks way too beardy to be innocent. Let's go kill him.
And I think this is a very slippery slope. With the recent events going on, I noticed even a swell of sentiment within our own group. And I
would be lying that if you talked to me right after I heard the news of those people being killed in Nice, you would have heard some brutal language out of my mouth. And that's tricky because, people caught up in that emotional moment aren't thinking clearly. Even me.
Right.
And I don't say even me like I'm special. I'm just a regular guy.
Right.
But to be able to catch yourself and stop that, and that's hard to do. I mean, imagine how you would feel if one of your children was one of the people killed in Nice.
Sure.
Yeah,
it is a very emotionally charged situation, and I think that where it becomes tricky is that we are looking at a society within our group. We have a group of people that are, and referring to the tribe, these are people that are trying to live that warrior lifestyle. And so when you have a group of people that are that understand violence and understand have an internalized that desire to protect, they want to jump to arms. But like I said, it's a very slippery slope because, I'm afraid that the sentiment is going to win out over the reason and logic as far as, having discernment of what the enemy is and what and who the enemy is not.
It very well can. But remember, this is not a conventional war like World War II where the battle lines were drawn. You knew who the enemy were. They were wearing enemy uniforms. This is not even like the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese Army and during the Vietnam conflict. This is an entirely different kind of war. It's The people that are perpetrating these actions, they could be anything from a professor to a truck driver. You don't know where they're coming from, and I think that's what's scaring people the most. And it is going to have very negative reactions, because they're going to start to see everybody who can be categorized as that group as a potential enemy. And then it doesn't take long for people to say, well, he's a potential enemy, let's get him before he gets us. And I can see the reasoning there. I can even understand it. And I don't like saying this about myself, but I get extremely angry. And I have caught myself paying a little bit more attention when I hear Arabic or Farsi spoken around me. I don't like it, and I shouldn't, and I know it's wrong. I know that it is. This is like ladies clutching their purse a little bit closer because a black guy walked nearby. I mean, it's crazy and it's wrong, but I understand where it's coming from. I do. When you see people cheering Donald Trump, and I understand where they're coming from. I do understand it. But this is where we as thinking individuals, we don't have to have that spiritual war or that bladed conflict or refiring weapons. A warrior can also step into the intellectual field and say, stop, think. It's just like archery. I don't know if either one of you are archers, but it's a wonderful thing to study because, everything is about breath, posture, motion, stance. Everything has to be in line, and you have to stop and look yourself over before you let that arrow go. There's a lesson in that for us all, that sometimes we got to stop, especially when we're feeling this emotional upheaval, this push, this anger, and say, wait a minute, stop, check my structure.
Yeah. And
then we'll find out, wait a minute, we're wrong. Can't do it this way. Now, I'm not saying that we should not eliminate all the ISIS fighters. I think, we should start at the top and just work our way down. And we should keep doing it until the Islamic State completely loses its will and capacity to injure people again.
But I think there needs to be that element of fairness there. And what you're saying, that discernment. And part of that is, an attribute of a warrior is being able to discern. And I always tell people that painting in broad strokes is one of the most dangerous things that can be done.
I'm so very glad that you said that, because we can compare this to another war that the United States was in, a very bloody and hostile war. That was World War II, in our fight against Japan. And we went to some pretty far lengths to win that war. We vaporized 2 major cities, killing countless number of people, using weapons that are just horrid and terrifying, right? Look at how we were in victory. We recognized the value of the Japanese people. We rebuilt. And now Japan and the U.S. are very close friends, with regular tourism back and forth, very strong diplomatic relations between the nations and the people. I think this is fantastic, because I think that's a model on how you end a war, not necessarily the weapons used.
But too
often we lose the peace. We respected them afterwards. Now, after World War I, the conflict against Kaiser Wilhelm's Germany was just hammered with such heavy war reparations and other restrictions. It created a massive poverty situation that guaranteed somebody like Adolf Hitler could come up and come to power. That's disrespecting your opponent. You're not recognizing their inherent humanity, even in victory. In victory, we should be magnanimous. In war, we should be ferocious. But when it's over, it is over. And I think that there has been decades and decades and decades of meddling in Middle Eastern affairs that have created the political environment that has allowed groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS to be able to gain power. Now, we got psychos in the U.S., too. We've got the Aryan Nations. We've got the new Black Panther Party. We've got the Army of God. We got the fundamentalist sect of the Church of the Latter-day Saints, or whatever they call themselves, that Warren Jeffs baby-raping group. We don't let them have power because we have a little bit more stable situation to where those radical ideas are not able to catch on and they're not able to get power. You go to some place that is the social structure is disordered. It makes it really easy for the wrong kind of people to get power. It makes it easy. Because of that reaction that you were just talking about, Vargas, people are scared. They're upset. They feel humiliated. They're hungry. You live in Chicago, brother. That's a city that's about 9 miles away from complete anarchy.
Well, gentlemen, I'm on the south side of the city right now, and I have a locker full of carcasses of cows waiting to be cut up that I have to get back to work. But, Doctor, I appreciate your time. And, Brother Vargas, thank you very much for having me. But I think this is a way larger discussion that both of you need to continue and may be serious.
You know what? Let's set up future talks on it. The three of us can just shoot the proverbial breeze on it.
Excellent.
Grab some other topics around. We can do this again in the future.
Excellent. Great.
Love to.
So this is a good time to wrap up, and I want to thank you, Hanjiro, for being on with us today. And Dr. Smith, thank you very much again. Always a pleasure to speak with you. We most definitely will be coming back to the tribe with a part 2 and hopefully part 3 of this conversation because it is just too good to wrap up right here. So again, thank you very much, gentlemen.
And all you guys know how to get a hold of me, so thanks.
Thank you.